think we're friends today. Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel and welcome if you're new. I'm Pluto and I'm a lawyer based in Australia. And for today's video, we're gonna discuss and look at the final judgment that has been rendered in the Depp versus Heard defamation trial. I've also picked up a few interesting things in the final judgment that may hint at Johnny appealing. So we already know and did indeed get confirmation during the hearing from Elaine that Amber does indeed intend to appeal. But what we weren't entirely sure of, but did anticipate a little bit, is Johnny potentially appealing the counterclaim verdict that was made for Amber Heard in the amount of $2 million. So, things worth noting. Firstly, there is no injunction. Ben Chu stated that there will be no post-trial motions and that they will simply be responding to Amber Heard. And there he goes, taking a shower in front of the world again. Classy, Leo, keep it classy. So it does look like Johnny's taking the high road and just letting her dig her own grave, which she seems to be really good at doing. Secondly, Amber's appeal bond. Because she wants execution of the judgment to be suspended, so she wants to stop Johnny from being able to enforce it and to collect the $10.35 million, the Virginia civil procedure rules require her to pay an amount as stipulated by the court in order to suspend execution, and this amount is the entire amount of the judgment. It is worth noting that she has to pay this exorbitant amount because she wants to suspend execution of the judgment. As per the rules, it looks like an appellant would normally only have to pay $500 in an appeal bond if they don't want to stay execution of the judgment. Now, Elaine did indeed confirm, as I stated earlier, that Amber will be appealing, despite the fact that she has to post $10.35 million to satisfy the appeal bond. She has 30 days from the date of the final verdict, which is the 24th of June, 2022, to file her appeal. Elaine stated it will be done by next Friday. At least that's what I read online. So naturally, this has led people to ask, where on earth is Amber Heard going to get this money from? Because a day after the verdict, Elaine stated on television during her interviews that Amber Heard does not have $8.35 million if you want to look at the net amount, because Johnny owes her $2 million in damages, or $10.35 million, whichever way you want to look at it. She doesn't have the requisite amount to pay damages. Fast forward, not even a month later, she can somehow magically conjure that amount to file an appeal. If you'll remember, or if you may not know, on the 10th of June, Amber filed a list of evidence, mostly transcripts and depositions, under seal. Judge Ascarate was having none of that. She told Elaine that when the trial started, everything was unsealed and she intended for things to remain that way. And so they're going to have to unseal everything that they filed under seal. If you're not too sure, filing things under seal would basically bar the public and the media, basically anyone other than the parties involved, from being able to access this evidence. So naturally, unsealing everything will once again make it publicly available. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Johnny filed objections to the final order, and they're quite extensive. It seems to me that he's preserving his options or his arguments for appeal. Preserving arguments for appeal is a very important step in the litigation process because failure to do so or adequately do so can actually prevent appellate counsel, so the appeal lawyers, from raising issues in appeal. So from the looks of it, and very understandably, Johnny seems to mainly have an issue with the counterclaim verdict. Now, I do want to briefly touch upon the jury's counterclaim finding for Amber, because when you really look at it, it doesn't make that much sense, and I wanted to save it until the judgment was finalized. So here we are. The first and third statements that were found to not be defamatory both involved an accusation of a hoax. The jury rejected the notion that that was defamatory. The second statement, which was found to be defamatory, starts off with the exact same accusation, which is, quite simply put, this was an ambush, a hoax. I believe I've said this before, but what the jury seemed to have found to be defamatory was the staging allegation, which is strange when you think about the fact that that's part of a hoax, right? When you're staging things. But I suppose they just weren't convinced that Adam or Johnny truly believed that Amber set up the crime scene for the second set of officers. What matters here with a finding of actual malice is that Johnny, and Adam by extension, truly did not believe or had a reckless disregard for the truth with regards to the setup allegation. But it's strange because I think they have really demonstrated, and the jury seemed to think so as well based on rejecting the other two statements, that Johnny had plenty of reason to believe that Amber was staging things along the way. So why not this incident? Why was this incident found to be defamatory and made with actual malice? It's almost an inconsistent, or dare I say, contradictory verdict. I do wonder whether this was a compromise amongst jurors. Maybe a few of them were holding out for Amber and made a bargain and said, we'll give you a unanimous verdict in favor of Johnny if you give us this one verdict or counterclaim in favor of Amber. Usually, a telltale sign of compromise amongst jurors is an inconsistent verdict that doesn't necessarily make sense, seems a little bit illogical, doesn't add up. And the use of the words in Johnny's objection that the counterclaim finding is unsupported by the facts and contrary to law tells me that they seem to think that this verdict for Amber is contradictory, inconsistent, and just doesn't make sense. Now, I do have to say, and I've said this before on the channel multiple times, jury verdicts are incredibly difficult to overturn. It's a way of safeguarding the entire system, because if it was easy to overturn a jury's verdict every time a party doesn't agree with it, then it kind of renders the entire jury system pointless. There are rare instances, by the way, where a judge can actually overturn a jury's verdict during the trial. So once a verdict has been rendered, they can actually interject and go, that's completely excessive or unreasonable or unfounded, and we're not going to go with that. I'm going to replace it with this. For example, let's say there is a personal injury case where the jury came back with a verdict of $20 million in damages. If that is entirely excessive based on the facts, based on the actual injury sustained by the plaintiff, let's say they sprained their ankle. You don't need $20 million in damages to compensate you for spraining your ankle. So the judge can actually interfere and bring that down to, let's say, I don't know, $5,000. I know it's a huge jump, but I just want to show you that these things can happen. And in fact, when you think about it, it did sort of happen in Johnny's case, because the jury came back with punitive damages of $5 million for Johnny Depp. But Judge Ascarate intervened and brought that down all the way back to $350,000 in accordance with the cap that is imposed in Virginia. In terms of jury verdicts being overturned upon appeal, again, the same concept stands, which is this happens rarely, but that doesn't mean it doesn't happen. And I'm not very experienced in appeal cases, so I'm not an appellate attorney. I haven't worked on appeal cases. But from what I remember learning and from my mentors and just observing and just obviously being in the environment, sometimes when, let's say, a jury makes a finding that is completely unreasonable and excessive, as Johnny is arguing here for the $2 million, but the trial judge doesn't intervene, as Judge Ascarate didn't. If this is appealed, and then Johnny argues, as he has listed in his objections, that this is excessive, if it is actually excessive, the court can look at it and change it, overturn it. The same applies to inconsistent or, I suppose, legally inadequate verdicts that just don't make sense. Those can be overturned as well. So it goes way beyond the matter of, I don't like the verdict. There has to be a really serious and incredibly persuasive reason to overturn a jury's verdict. Do I think that Johnny has legitimate grounds for an appeal? I mean, I personally believe, as I argued earlier, that the verdict in terms of the counterclaim is inconsistent with the verdict in favor of Johnny Depp, and also inconsistent with the rejection of the two other statements within the counterclaim that were found to be not defamatory. And let's not forget that Adam actually filed an investigation for perjury with the LAPD, which has now been transferred to the LA Sheriff's Department. And as I mentioned in previous videos, these are not the actions of someone acting with actual malice. The fact that Adam filed that complaint, I think, would greatly assist in demonstrating why they were not motivated by actual malice when they made these statements. There is, of course, also the argument that Adam was simply responding to what the other side was saying within those articles that were deemed to be defamatory. And so the readers got to see the for and against. So there wasn't any unfairness, and Adam didn't go out of his way to just simply start, accusing Amber of orchestrating a hoax without being prompted for a response against the other side. There is one more objection I want to bring up that I forgot to while I was filming, which is the third one that you see up here on the screen, and it relates to the counterclaim, but more specifically, the agency argument. So whether Adam Waldman was acting as Johnny's agent when he made the statements to the Daily Mail. The objection relates to the notion that Adam and Johnny in that situation were essentially interchangeable, and that Adam Waldman is to be taken as standing in Johnny Depp's shoes. These were almost exactly the same words that Elaine used in her closing arguments. And if you're looking at the word mens rea on the screen and wondering what it means, it simply means intention. So it's the mental element of intention or state of mind. What's an issue here is relying on the mens rea of either Mr. Depp or Mr. Waldman and permitting Ms. Heard to argue the same to the jury in closing, which is what I just referenced Elaine saying. I think the issue that they have here is that this almost assumes or allows the jury to assume that an agency relationship existed when Amber had the burden of proving that Adam Waldman acted as Johnny's agent. I've already explained agency law in a standalone video on my channel, and I don't believe that speaking to the press falls within the scope of employment or agency of an attorney. Namely, an attorney doesn't need to speak to the press in order to fulfill the obligations that they owe their client. Since it doesn't fall within the scope of employment, that means implied authority cannot be relied upon, and we'll have to look at express authority. So there must be evidence that Johnny expressly authorized Adam to make those statements. Such evidence does not exist. In other words, Amber did not provide any evidence to prove this point. And so there is a strong argument against agency. So even if the statements were found to be defamatory, Johnny shouldn't have been held liable for the actions of Adam Waldman. And that's my understanding of what they're arguing here in this objection. By allowing Elaine to tell the jury that Adam Waldman is to be seen as standing in Johnny Depp's shoes when he made those statements, it was almost a shortcut to prove agency. Just assume it. You don't need the proof. And that was permitted by the court, hence the objection. All right, back to the video. Of the two of them, I think Johnny has far stronger grounds of appeal than Amber does. I've already surmised what I think her grounds of appeal are in the last video, and it's not news to you that I don't think they're strong in the slightest. But I always have to put this out there. I could be wrong. That's it for this video, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed it, go ahead and give it a like, and maybe even subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll catch you in a future video. Thanks so much. Take care. See you next time.